You can write off Chicago and New York as just being, oh, it's just big government. And you can try to say, put a wall around welfare, yeah, right after you repeal the law of gravity. That's not happening. What the other side does is cite, I mean, that Fortune 500 thing, yeah, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, they cite a few really successful immigrants who are from from South Africa, from Russia, and then, yeah, okay, we get 10 of those and 20 million leaf blowers. No, nobody's being stopped. Nobody's being turned away. Not one of these alleged asylees should be getting in at the border. It's been the United States of America that has rescued the rest of the world from tsunamis, from earthquakes, from warlords, from starvation. And not by saying, hey, move in. Once this country is gone, and we're heading there fast, it's lights out for the rest of the world.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all is good wherever you are. In this video, we're going to look at a few sections of a very long debate that was a part of the free press debates. This included Anne Coulter, Cenk Uygur, Sohrab Ahmari, and Nick Gillespie. Now, obviously, we're not going to look at all the opening statements and all the debate because this would be a 3-hour video, but we're going to take a look at the meat and potatoes of it, and also we're going to have a look at the opening statements of Anne Coulter, and one of the main reasons why I think we should shut the border, the delusional Cenk Uygur. Let's get started with Anne Coulter's opening statement.
Anne Coulter, you are first up, and you have 5 minutes for your opening argument. Then a bell will ring when you have 1 minute left.
Oh. I have a lot more than 6 minutes, but I'll try to keep it to that. There's a reason millions of people are trying to come to our country. But if they come, we won't be our country anymore. They are leaving their failed cultures. They're coming to a very successful culture. What is a culture other than the people who are in it? If just crossing the Rio Grande turns people into freedom-loving Americans, we can stop all wars, just bring the Afghans over, dump them in the Rio Grande, bring the, Iraqis over, dump them in the Rio Grande, send them back. No, a culture is the people who live in it. We're more than just a landmass. Or the Indians would have written the Declaration of Independence, built New York City, put a man on the moon. It's like taking a very expensive wine bottle and pouring vinegar into it and then pretending it's the same wine bottle. No, the culture is the people. There are 8 billion people in the world, and most of them would love to come here. 4 billion of them, which is to say more than half, live on less than $10 a day. Are we going to take them all, move them all into the confines, the landmass of our country? Well, no, of course, we're going to have to choose. So how do we choose? I think we should choose people who are better than us, people who are better looking, who are taller, who are smarter. Let's get our average up. And for the first 300 years, which I'll explain in a moment, that's how our country worked. But we can't do that anymore because Teddy Kennedy needed a legacy. He was in his room pouting. He wanted a civil rights bill, too. His brothers both got to have one. Apparently, our entire country is about improving the self-esteem of this one Irish Catholic family. So his prize, his Kennedy family prize, was civil rights for the entire world. Thus, we got the 1965 Civil Rights Act. It sounds like, the belief of some hippie cult. Every poor person in the world has the right to come here, and we have to take care of them. Not only does every poor person get to come, but they get to bring their cousins. In America, your family is your spouse and your kids. This nephew, third cousin, brother-in-law, no, that's third world stuff. This isn't family reunification. We are doing tribal reunification. The difference between pre-1965, post-1965 immigrants is huge. I think when most people say, like Trump, no, we like legal immigrants, or when they get weepy about their grandfathers at Ellis Island, they're really talking about the difference between pre-1970, post-1970. That's about how long it took for Kennedy's 1965 Act to kick in. Pre-1970 immigrants were better than us. They were more educated, They were wealthier, they bought more houses. Oh boy, post-1970 immigrants aren't that at all. They are far more likely to be on welfare. There are a lot of ways to fiddle with the numbers, but one of the main ones is counting anchor babies as Americans. Well, okay, most of our welfare is dedicated to poor people with children. So if the illegal runs across the border, 8 months pregnant, drops a baby, and then starts collecting welfare on that anchor baby who's about to bring in her whole village, that can be counted as an American citizen on welfare. So what you want to look at is foreign-born head of family versus native-born, US-born head of family. And when those comparisons are made, the foreign-born head of family, 54% collecting government assistance. US-born head of family, and by the way, that includes all of the immigrants that have come in since the 1965 Civil Rights Act, 34%. Now, the reason for this, and the reason we didn't have to have any rules before, I mean, there was an ethnic preference for the countries that founded and built this country, but you didn't really have to have rules. It was hard to get here. You had to have some stamina to even get here. But moreover, there was no welfare. That is the crucial turning point. It was a double whammy in 1965. We're going to have the Great Society programs, and we're going to open up immigration to the Third World. In fact, prefer the Third World. Interestingly, pre-1970 immigrants, Ellis Island immigrants, 30% of them went home because they couldn't make it in America. No welfare. If you can't do something, you're going to starve or you're going to go home. 60% of Southern Italians went home. The fewest who went home were the English, Scandinavians, and the Jews. That was like 5 to 10%. So now we're just bringing in the poorest people of the world with the most dissonant cultures, and we have collective lying from the media, the Democrats, the Republicans. The Republicans want the donor money for the cheap labor. I've never seen an issue more lied about. The media will tell you about every immigrant valedictorian, but will not tell you about the child rape, about the drunk driving, about the human smuggling, about the slavery they're bringing in. Yep, we fought a war to end it. Now we're getting it back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think most of you that follow my channel, that are subscribed here, would agree with probably all of what she said, at least 80% of it for sure. Now let's take a look at a much more delusional take from Cenk Uygur, and then we'll get into the actual debate.
Last up is Cenk Uygur.
Hey guys, wonderful to be here in Texas with you all. Love the food. Who puts fried egg on a chili? I'll tell you who. Geniuses. So, first of all, I got news for you guys. Everyone here is descendants of immigrants. So that's, of course, true. Even if you're a Native American, you started in Central Asia, where my folks also originally started. The Turks went west, you went east, and here you are. On the Mayflower, literally every one of those folks were undocumented immigrants. Where's your papers? I don't see your papers. You did not come here legally if you came from the Mayflower. Now, obviously different rules at the time. Now, guys, we need immigrants. Literally, the entire country, 100% of us are descendants of immigrants. To say that, no, we're not going to do any more immigrants, well, that's preposterous. The only question is, how are we going to do immigration, not whether we're going to do immigration. By the way, if you think it's a great idea to stop anybody else from coming in or going out and close off and let's just stay what we are now, this culture is great. Well, good news for you, the Ming Dynasty agreed almost exactly 500 years ago. That's why they burned all their ships to the ground. It was called the treasure fleet. And the Chinese ships at the time were so dominant. They're about 10 times the size of the European ships. And that's why they were economic giants 500 years ago. And after they burned their ships and didn't have anybody going in or out, a 200-year massive slump. And it destroyed their dynasty. because closing yourself off from the rest of the world is a recipe for disaster. So let's have a realistic conversation about how do we get people in here and do it the right way. Look, I know that there are real concerns about immigration, especially undocumented immigration. So let's talk about which of those concerns are legitimate and illegitimate. So, of course, you're not going to be surprised to find out that I think a lot of it is illegitimate. But I'll surprise you with a couple of opinions. I think some are legitimate. So first of all, on illegitimate. Oh my God, they're criminals and rapists, said the guy who was indicted 91 times and proven in court to have done sexual assault. So there is a criminal and a rapist. It's the guy who said that comment, okay? Now, but that's an anecdote, and that's just one awful human being. But when you look at large, it is a stone-cold fact that native-born citizens, and if you're in that category, sorry, but you are the most likely to be criminals. So undocumented immigrants are only half as likely to commit crime as natural-born Americans. And if you're in my group and Sorab's group of documented immigrants, we're the safest of all. We're a quarter. So that, you know what? That means natural-born Americans are 4 times more likely to commit crime than we are. We're just little teddy bears up here, okay? So crime is not true. By the way, the gangs are coming in. You watch Fox News. Oh, they're all gangs, right? MS-13. Well, there's documentation. And the number of people who are coming in who are coming from gangs are 0.09%. So that's a mirage. It's literally not true that they are more criminal than the average American. So how about jobs? They're taking our jobs. Are they? We literally have record low unemployment. And this is not a partisan issue. Both under Trump and Biden, except for COVID, obviously, we had really good low unemployment. And if they took all of our jobs, how come unemployment isn't sky high? We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the whole world. They're definitely not taking our jobs. And guys, who are you kidding? Did you all just come from a meatpacking plant and they took your jobs? No. Did you all just pick lettuce and then come to the Majestic Theater? No, they're taking the jobs that Americans won't do. In fact, Bush in 2006 said, we're going to get these dastardly undocumented immigrants. They did several raids, and this happens every single time there's a raid. This one was in Stillmore, Georgia. They go and they take out all the immigrants, and guess what happened? The whole town died. It was a small town, about 1,000 people, and once they took out all the undocumented immigrants, the only plant in town collapsed, and the entire town collapsed. They've done that about a half a dozen times. That's why they don't do it anymore, and even Trump barely did it, because it's a terrible idea. So it's not that. So the legitimate part is that, yes, when people came to the border towns, then it was a mess, and that's not fair to the border towns. And in fact, when Governor Abbott first decided to do the buses to the northern cities, I surprised a lot of people on the Young Turks when I said, that's a really good idea. Politically, it was a really good idea, but on top of that, I said, why should the border states carry all of the pain? Why shouldn't it also go to the cities? And if you live in a blue city, as I do, and you really believe in immigration, then you shouldn't have any problem with it. And people are like, well, you can't say that. Well, whoa. So it turns out you don't want them either, right? So now why am I telling you that when I'm pro-immigration? Because the problem, guys, yeah, I get it. When you put a whole bunch of new people into a new place, yes, will sometimes crime go up? They don't know where to go, etc. Why, though? Is it because of the nature of who they are? We know through the stats that it is definitely not the nature of who they are. It's because we don't have a rational immigration system. Do you know how many, the immigrants are coming, giant invasions. Do you know how many immigrants we let in as a percentage of the country every year? 0.2%. It's tiny. If those same people came in a documented way and we got them, a pathway to jobs, housing, etc., then they wouldn't be milling around in Chicago and New York and the border states, etc. They would do this in an orderly fashion, and I'm way out of time.
You are.
So
and we're
I've got
wrap it
so
up.
much more to say.
We're going to get into it right now.
Yes, so let's take it.
Okay.
To me, this is a very delusional take from somebody who spent their whole life talking about politics. This is the take that he has. It's crazy to me. Anyway, let's get into the meat and potatoes here and get into the actual debate. Now, I'll give you my thoughts throughout the clips. Let's get it.
Thank you. Let's do a quick round robin of rebuttals. And maybe let's start with you. And maybe just as a prompt, Nick accused you of nativism, but also of nostalgia for an imagined past. You talked about how pre-1970, the people were smarter, maybe they were taller, better looking. Certainly my great-grandparents weren't. So speak to that issue. Are you nostalgic for an imagined past, and obviously pick up on any arguments that the opposing side put out?
Oh, no, it's just simply a fact that pre-1970 immigrants weren't being supported by the welfare state. They went back. And also, I mean,
what percentage
people
of current immigrants
Please
go
don't
back?
interrupt me.
Go
I'm
ahead.
begging you. They act like we're King Canute trying to hold back the tide. No, the 1965 Act was specifically designed to bring in the third world and to stop people coming who had populated this country, who had built this country. Side note, I don't know if it makes you all feel happy to say we're a nation of immigrants and we're all descended of immigrants, fine, but it's not true unless you mean it in the sense that we're all descended from Adam and Eve, so we all came from someplace. You couldn't immigrate here before there was an established society, there was an American established colony, and then it became a country and fought the revolution. And as of 1990, half of Americans still trace their ancestry back to those original Americans. It wasn't America before they got here.
Nick?
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. I mean...
Well, I can throw,
yeah,
I can throw in
please,
another question for you.
I mean, because the fact is 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 5 people on this panel don't trace their heritage back to the revolution or anything like that. So we trace our heritage back, or Barry and I do, to laws that were passed that kept out our ancestors at a particular moment in time. In 1924, it was over. If you were Italian, if you were Jewish, coming from Europe, you weren't coming into the country anymore.
So, Anne, what is your cutoff when you're thinking about an immigrant? Who qualifies
Look,
and who doesn't?
I don't care if I'm just saying what this business about we're a nation of immigrants and we're all descended from immigrants. I'm just saying it's simply not true. And yes,
No, but
it was
it
bad
is
that
true. I
it
mean,
was
that's
bad
a
that
defiance of
it was
reality.
bad that FDR turned the shipload of Jews away. Of course it was. Does that mean we have to wreck our country over this? It's also absolutely 100% not true that immigrants commit fewer crimes. This is fiddling with the numbers. There's one famous Cato study where they looked at Texas's prison, and they counted immigrants only, or illegal immigrants who had been caught and fingerprinted by the border police, because when they're first putting them in prison, that's the only thing they know. Wait a year, and they find out all those others are also illegals. So they were counting as citizens someone who couldn't already be identified as an illegal. Look at the most wanted lists in places like Los Angeles, well, any hotbed of immigration. Look at one place, I mean, this is why I wrote Adios America, because the government lies to us. They will not tell us. Just give us a breakdown on immigrant, illegal immigrant, citizens or legal immigrant in our prisons, arrested, convicted. They won't tell us that, and I notice my side is the side asking for it. Prisons, I just want to make one last point on this.
Last point.
Prisons need to know the ethnicity of who's in prison because of the gang fights. They keep records, and look at the records. It is the top 20 groups in New York are all from Latin America. You have to get down to like the 40.
Very quickly,
Okay,
we would have less crime in America if the Kennedy family had been kept out. I will grant that.
You guys might agree on that
Okay.
issue. I want to pick up.
But I want to point out about crime and things like that. First off, even with the recent increases that happened during the pandemic, when immigration stopped in the country, we saw a rise in crime. So you would think illegals not coming into the country and crime rising. That's peculiar, right? And in any case, when I was suggesting that Anne was living in a past, or the crime rates in America now are much lower than they were 20, 30 years ago. So to focus on crime when we're talking about immigration seems to me to be a gigantic red herring.
I would like to put to you guys an issue that Saurabh raised, which is this issue of wage suppression, because I imagine that you guys have different perspectives on it. Cenk is a progressive, Nick is a libertarian. Is it true that immigrants, legal or illegal, suppress wages of the middle and working classes in this country?
Guys, if you don't mind just smashing that thumbs up button for your boy, really goes a long way into helping me out, helping this channel reach more people. And also, if this is not your first time here and you're not yet subscribed, hopefully this will be the video in which I can earn your subscription. Let's get back to it.
Yeah, it depends. So first of all, as a populist progressive, I can't stand the corporate rule that we live under. So part of the reason that we have this problem in the first place, guys, is because the companies want cheap labor. And so, and that's part of the reason why our vegetables are so cheap and our food is cheap and et cetera. And so they don't, if we had an efficient system, well, then they would have to pay people more, and they don't want that. There's a reason why it's broken. Almost everything in this country is because of campaign contributions. And when corporations give money, the politicians do as they're told. And in this case, they're told, don't fix it. So I understand that. But at the same time, what I've seen, and as a progressive, I care a lot about higher wages for Americans, is that none of the fear-mongering came to pass. We did not have huge unemployment. We didn't lose our jobs. The wages were not related to that at all. And you've seen the meta-studies, and they show that they're not related. So the things that wages are related to are, for example, is there a higher minimum wage? Does that push up other wages? Corporate power. You see, from 1938 to 1978, productivity in America was sky high, and our wages matched it. It was terrific. Then the Supreme Court legalized bribery and allowed corporate contributions. From then on, your productivity still soars, but your wages flatline. It's because of corporate power. It has nothing to do with the immigrants. And in fact, waves and waves of immigrants have absolutely proven that to be the case.
But Cenk,
Yes, sorry,
can I
go
intervene on a couple of things? Because everyone just vaguely suggested studies, and I just want to go through some of them in a granular way. So I just heard a few things from the other side. One was Americans just won't do certain jobs. Now think about this. In the sectors where immigrants are most represented, especially illegal immigrants, you're talking about dry cleaning and laundry, building maintenance, apparel manufacture, landscaping, private household work. At most, in each of these sectors, migrant labor is about 20%. So that means that there are plenty of non-migrant Americans, legal migrants or American domestic workers who work these jobs. It is not true that we won't do them. So when farmers, ranchers, and developers complain that they can't find American workers, what they mean is they can't find American workers willing to work serf-like conditions. So another point, that Americans just won't do these jobs. If that's the case, then why do Disney and some tech firms have their own current domestic workforce train their H-1B visa replacements and then usher them out of the way? Those people, those Americans, were happy to work those jobs. So in all the areas where we have low migrant populations, that includes certain black neighborhoods and places like Appalachia, you will find non-migrants doing the jobs that migrants do in high migration areas. So it is not true that Americans don't do certain jobs. Can I do one more?
Well,
because I was the only one who kept to the 5 minutes.
Okay, one more.
Okay.
And he's so prepared, it's like breaking my heart. Yeah, sorry,
okay.
One more.
All right, so you heard that we all benefit as consumers. It's good for us as consumers. So if lowering the prices of goods and services by lowering wages, including through labor arbitrage, which is immigration, is such a great idea, why not help all Americans just constantly lower their wages, not just the ones who have to compete with migrant labor? Why not legalize child labor? It would definitely lower consumer prices.
Actually, the Republicans are trying.
So they also say we all benefit as consumers. No. That's a statistical trick. Some Americans make gains, but they treat it as gains made by all Americans. If you hire a serf to clean your house at a discount rate, how do I, as a consumer in general, benefit from that? You're the one who got your house clean at a discount because of a vulnerable migrant. So why don't we generalize the harms to workers, which is definitely to some classes of workers, and that's the non-college majority that are most at risk by illegal immigration and offshoring. Those are the classes of Americans that are most at risk from these practices. If we generalize the benefits as consumers, why don't we generalize how we think about the harms to those classes, the non-college majority in this country?
Okay, one of the things that I'm surprised...
If I may just,
Hey, Nick,
there is
30 seconds, and then I want to go to national
there's
security.
a broad consensus that cheap labor hurts non-high school graduates in the labor force, which is a shrinking and small part of the labor force. So that would be a place where if low-skill, low-wage workers have problems, then you help them. You help them retrain, you help them with certain types of bonus payments and things like that. When you talk about immigrants acting like serfs, ask them, why do they come here? Why do illegal people, we're not even talking about legal people, and Jimmy John's, by the way, the sandwich shop in Texas, is paying people $20 an hour to make sandwiches. That is not slavery, that is not serfdom, that is not anything terrible. And you can ask about illegal immigrants who come to the border, they get caught, they get sent back to Mexico. They come back again, and they come back again. Are they coming back again because they want to be exploited and they want to live in poverty? Or it's because what they have in America is better than that. They are not being exploited. They are building a future for themselves, and it is not coming out of the mouth of Americans.
As Barbara Jordan, again, a Democrat, as her commission...
When was she saying that?
In the late 90s, but the principle doesn't change. Yes, if you have conditions in which you're surviving on $1 or less than $1 a day, of course, whatever you put before people is going to be the jobs they find here is advantageous to them. That's understandable. But the fact is that what we're saying is we're telling our native workers that they have to get used to serf-like conditions, because you have a class of workers who won't go to OSHA if they face unsafe conditions, and that happens horrifically in the meatpacking industry.
Your argument,
they won't go to like the National Labor Relations Board when there's wage theft, and that happens horrifically with
Point
migrants.
made. I want to talk about, I'm shocked that this far into the conversation, national security came up in no one statement. And one of the things one of the things that's known is that people are coming through the Darien Gap from all over the world. They're coming from China, they're coming from Russia, they're coming from Syria, they're coming from Egypt, they're coming from Mauritania, they're coming from everywhere. And we don't know who those people are. How much of a concern is that for those of you on the stage? Maybe, Cenk, let's start with you.
Zero, none.
Why?
Okay. So let's talk
because
about
you
reality.
hate America.
Yeah,
Right?
let's talk about reality.
Because
So-
that, to me, seems like the thing that has radicalized a lot of people on this issue.
Yeah, they're empirically incorrect. So first of all, Fox News will demagogue and go, "Oh my God, there was a prayer rug. There's a Muslim guy coming." First of all, what does that even mean? So there's a Muslim guy coming in. Why don't you just tell me you're a bigot? Like, I'm not saying you guys. I'm saying Fox News. That doesn't prove a goddamn thing. What does it prove? Oh, there's a prayer rug. And it turns out, of course, it's not. So you know how many terrorists have come in through the border and then done a massive plot against us? To my knowledge, zero. Zero. Okay, do you know how many people have done mass shootings in America? Tons and tons and tons. Are we kidding ourselves? The mass shootings that happen every single day, the massacre after massacre. And yes, that's all of us, the people that live in America. There's not this demagoguing about national security is nonsense. If you're talking about national security and giving away our secrets, the real threats they are super rich. They come on planes. There are spies. Look, it's bipartisan. The Chinese spy who slept with Eric Swalwell. This Chinese spy. It's true.
That, by the way, is work that an American won't do.
And by the way, the Chinese spy that was caught at Mar-a-Lago. All you got to do is walk into Mar-a-Lago.
Okay,
and get
now
all the secrets.
Cenk says he has zero concern for national security. Anne, Sorab, want to jump in?
Well, I have a few terrorist attacks that were done by immigrants. 9/11, the Orlando
Did they come
shooting.
across the border? That's not true at all.
Go ahead, Anne.
Again, who was talking there? I don't care if they came across the border. San Bernardino. Oh, and by the way, it's hard to figure these things out because one of the San Bernardino terrorists, as well as the Orlando Pulse nightclub terrorist, was born in America. So the media 100% described them as American man, American man. Yes, it's the apple-cheeked boy next door. How did this happen? Homegrown. The Boston bombers. And how did they get in? Family reunification. They had some uncle someplace who had come in. Basically, every terrorist attack you can think of. Oh, the Times Square bomber, the first World Trade Center bombing. All of them, they were illegal immigrants under the Agricultural Adjustment Act in the 1965 immigration law that allowed agricultural workers to stay, and they would just lie. The INS knew that 90% of them were fake and just let them in anyway. So those are a few committed by immigrants.
But I've got to say, literally none of those people crossed the border. Literally none.
You're
Who
talking,
cares?
but if what we're talking about, you were talking
It's
about
worse that they come in legally.
You were talking about national security concerns on the southern border from people pouring in. First off, as Cenk was talking about, the 9/11 bombers, who are front of mind on all of this, got visas and permits. They flew first class. They were not coming across the border. In any case, this is a reason to have an actual working pathway where you can vet people as opposed to have, a rush of people who are all coming at the same time and overwhelming any kind of process. If the process starts back in their home countries, you can have a more manageable border and you can actually check people at the door rather than it being like a Who concert or something like
They
that.
were vetted. The Boston Marathon bombers, San Bernardino,
So
Orlando,
then-
they were
yeah,
all vetted.
that's
Our
not the
immigration
question
system
in front of
said,
us.
welcome.
Okay.
No,
So
now
earlier-
now, hold on. Now you're talking about documented immigrants, right? So I came in the same way. My uncle's
I'm
a
talking about
doctor, came
immigrants.
in, and then, and what did I do? It goes right to your opening statement, Barry, which is, okay, then my dad came in and he started a company, hired hundreds of Americans, helped the American economy, wonderfully productive. Then I started a company, I hired hundreds of Americans. So you mentioned two, Sacramento, I believe, and the Boston bombers, and they didn't come across the border. And how about the hundreds of other terrorist attacks? How about the synagogue shootings? How about Pittsburgh? How about the shooting down in El Paso? How about literally thousands of shootings? And you have two documented immigrants and none that cross the border
There
illegally.
are
Saurabh,
not
go ahead, jump in.
thousands.
Well, Norm Macdonald had this great tweet, rest in peace.
A
He said-
Canadian, by the
he
way,
said-
I'll point out.
That's right. He said, if a Muslim explodes a dirty bomb that kills 50 million people, what I'd worry about is the backlash that the peaceful Muslims face. And I'm going to make a point similar to that, which is yes, right now we haven't had cases of people coming through the southern border endangering the homeland, but it takes one for it to happen, and then you will see this country impose genuinely unreasonable solutions. In other words, if the security threat that is incipient at the border is not addressed, then you will get the ugly solutions, right? So, and I don't want the ugly solutions because I don't want,
You'll hear Nick Gillespie and Cenk Uygur often say, we're a nation of immigrants. But until recently, that was not really true. Until very recently, the only way to get into the country was legally. Anybody ever see The Godfather? I think it was The Godfather 2, when young Vito Corleone comes to America. He's coming from Italy. He arrives. He has to go through Ellis Island. And then they find out he's got smallpox, so he's quarantined for 3-4 months. Well, that's actually kind of what happened over 100 years ago. Technology, cell phones, has given people easier access to countries. They know what we're doing. They know there's a better life here. They know how to get into the country. But now we don't do anything like that. We don't do anything at all. We don't know who these people are. These millions and millions of illegal immigrants that have came into the country. What happens if this keeps going 5 years, 10 years longer? We become Europe. Look at that shit show. I mean, I get it from the illegal migrants' point of view. You see the people coming into the country. Most of them, the high percentage of them, are military-age men. They're not women and children fleeing their husband's tyranny. They're coming here to work. They're not asylum seekers like the left will tell you. They're coming here for an opportunity to make more money. That's why people come. In America, there's more money. There's generous government benefits, there's housing subsidies, free education for their kids, free medical care for them. The illegal immigrant side of the story is quite good when they come to America. Makes perfect sense. Hell, I might even do the same thing if I was in their shoes. But who thinks about this from the American taxpayer's side? At what point does the government have to say enough is enough? Well, the point was a long time ago. It's estimated that Americans spend $200 billion a year housing, feeding, and schooling and caring for illegal migrants. $200 billion a year. The left likes to say, well, we have to think about them. They're fleeing poverty. They're fleeing war. We have to be compassionate. But where do we draw the line when the first act into coming into our country is an illegal one? Do we just allow anyone from any country? That's how compassionate we're going to be? The people that come across our southern border, as Anne Coulter will say, are overwhelmingly poorly educated. This isn't a judgment, it's a fact. Illegal migrants would normally work for almost any wage, much lower than any Americans. This takes jobs away from low-skilled Americans. The left will try to tell you that that's not the case, but listen, most of these illegals are doing landscaping jobs, farming jobs, construction jobs, jobs that Americans will do. The left will try to tell you that these are jobs that Americans don't want to do. That is BS. When they come across the southern border, they're coming across and paying the cartel to come into the country. The drug cartels in Mexico control the southern side of the border, the Mexican side of the border. Doesn't this mean that by letting in all these people, we are, in a sense, making the cartel richer and more powerful? The cartel's not using this money to help the Red Cross. It uses the money to further corrupt Mexico's police, their government officials, to give themselves more power, to buy more guns, to buy more drugs that they give to mules to cross the border with. A lot of those drugs are fentanyl that kill over 125,000 Americans every year. Ridiculous. Let's get back to the video.
I want to pick up on one thing.
I gotta say something about
Earlier in this conversation, Anne suggested that we should bring people in that are better than us, taller, thinner, better looking, higher IQ. Trump said something sort of similar a few days ago. He talked about how we should bring in people from nice countries like Denmark, Norway, Switzerland. They have something in common. Saurabh, you and I are from, well, I mean, when my ancestors came here, they were not considered white. Saurabh, you come from a country, Iran, that is not considered a nice country. If you could wave a magic wand, like, what is your ideal policy? Do you and Anne have some daylight on you on that?
So if you listen to Anne and if you have a certain point of view, you might think, wow, what horrible things she's saying. But again, I want to go back to the Barbara Jordan Commission. It was a really important document at the time. It was commissioned by the Clinton administration, and she more or less said what Anne said, which is we want skills-based immigration. In other words, it has to be cases where there's a need in the labor market rather than just flooding the country and harming Americans without high school education or just a high school education. And she mentioned the reunification methods, right? Where she said it has to be limited to the nuclear family. And that's what Barbara Jordan said, to prioritize the nuclear family if you're gonna have reunification, rather than like cousins and so on, and ever more distant, attenuated from the nuclear family. So I actually think a lot of what Anne said, I would sign up for as well. So that's what I would do. And yes, and I'll tell you one more thing. I came through the family reunification. I am a chain migrant. And so some people might say, well, how dare you then oppose other people who seek to gain entry into the United States the same way? And what I say to that is that now my allegiance is to the well-being and common good of this country, and therefore not to the general class of potential migrants out there who would be clamoring to get in. So I think that's a perfectly fair position for an immigrant to take.
Okay. Let's go to Cenk, and then I want to talk a little bit about the politics on this issue, because as we were coming down here to Dallas, big news broke that President Biden is sort of eyeing an executive order that could take hold as soon as this month that would dramatically limit asylum seekers from entering the country. And it's a very, very different position than where his presidency began. Of course, within the first hours of his presidency, he was rolling back what he called Trump's draconian immigration policies. Now he's ending up maybe somewhere.
To his credit, he has no idea what he was thinking then.
So, Cenk, jump in, but I kind of want you guys to touch on the politics of this. The one last thing I'll add is that We had a fabulous story in the Free Press a few weeks ago by Olivia Reingold that talked about 7 lawsuits being brought in the city of Chicago, almost all by people of color, including from a DEI consultant on the South Side named, I think, Darnell Jones, who said they're giving things away to migrants that we've been deprived of in a poor black community. So speak to the politics of this a little bit.
Yeah. So, first of all, I agree with her, and I'll come back to that. You're not going to get me to defend Joe Biden too much. I ran against him. So I'll come back to that too. But I've got to address 2 things. First of all, when I said national security threat is 0, there was gasps in the room. And let's just note for the record that the debate concluded with, well, what if there's one later? So that just literally happened. That was Sohrab's point. Okay. Now, on this idea of, but the bad countries are sending people in. What do you, like when the Irish and the Italian and the Jews were coming in, do you think that they were coming from great, amazing countries? At the time, the Irish were starving. They had the Great Potato Famine. They were so poor. The Italians were poor, and the Jews were poor. They lived in the worst parts of New York, etc. And we want to close it off. If we had done that completely and closed it off to those immigrants, it wouldn't be the America that we know and love today. And by the way, it might not even be America. The Jewish physicists driven out of Germany came to America, and we won World War II because of them. If we had done Anne Coulter's strategy at that time, we might not even exist.
We
That's
were
a terrible
doing Anne
idea.
Coulter's strategy. It was pre-1970.
And Cenk, you're a
Oh, that's such a convenient thing to say.
Cenk, you're a progressive. Between 1923 and 1965, you had the period of restriction of immigration, and that was the period when you had the highest union density in this country. That's the 30 glorious years. That's the New Deal order, and it coincided with pretty strictly controlled immigration.
Totally conflating 2 different issues. So corporate power becomes supersized in 1978 after the Supreme Court decisions of Bellotti and Buckley v. Vallejo. So we had a golden period of 38 to 78. We had plenty of immigrants at that point in different parts of that period. The immigrant does not jive with the story you're telling. It's actually all about corporate power, and why we were doing so well is because we had power in a democracy, the American people. If you cut off all of these countries based on, this arbitrary 1970 rule, right? Oh, well, yeah, it's inconvenient because everybody that came pre-1970 is about 98% of the country, right? But these guys, the Latinos, they're not good, and the new immigrants are not good because they're coming from really poor countries, and they're not helping.
Okay,
but the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and everyone else came from really poor countries.
That's great
Okay,
sort of informal reasoning.
Sohrab, 30 seconds, then
Okay.
Nick, 30
And
seconds.
Sohrab, you concede that it does not affect employment at all. Record low unemployment. You have to concede that.
30 seconds, then Nick.
So that's your anecdote. Here's what the labor economist, the preeminent economist of labor, the relation between labor unionism and immigration said. That's Vernon Briggs. Membership in American unions has over time moved inversely with trends in the size of immigration inflows. And here's what Cesar Chavez said, which is why Cesar Chavez always reported illegal immigrants to the authorities. He said, the illegal aliens are doubly exploited. First, because they are farm workers, and second, because they are powerless to defend their interests. But if there were no illegals used to break our strikes, then we could win those battles.
So
that's as old school a labor figure as you can imagine.
Then make them legal, okay? Make them legal, and then suddenly they're not under the rock and they're not under the boot of unsavory
The problem is
people.
the more heterogeneous the workplace, it becomes harder to organize.
The other thing is that private sector unionization peaked in the early to mid-'50s. It's a product of industrialization. That era is over. Okay, and American workers are actually gaining in wages and compensation. If I may come back to your other point, the problem with Chicago and Chicago City Services isn't illegal immigrants, it is generations of terrible city government, okay, and a welfare state that is completely out of control. The same thing in New York. It breaks my heart when Eric Adams says we can't handle 50,000 illegal immigrants coming into New York or something like that. You're telling me a city of 8.5 million people.
Martha's Vineyard couldn't handle any either.
No, and I would point out, unlike those people, I've never been to Martha's Vineyard. I would like to get on a bus sometime and I guess drive there or swim there. No, but more importantly,
I don't think you could take a bus there.
We do need to restrain welfare spending in general, and there's no question that in a place like New York, because of a court ruling, there is a right to shelter, et cetera, and it doesn't just extend to illegal or asylum seekers or anything, it's to all people. That is terrible. It's one of the reasons why New York State and especially New York City has trouble competing against places like Texas and Florida.
Okay.
Could I respond to that?
Yes, please.
You can write off Chicago and New York as just being, it's just big government, and you can try to say put a wall around welfare, right after you repeal the law of gravity. That's not happening. But I could give at least two very, very big counterexamples. Minnesota, the cleanest state in the Union, Scandinavians, utterly honest. They dump 100,000 Somalis on them. Immediately the welfare rolls double. Suddenly they're having all kinds of child rape, human smuggling, lots of credit card skimming. And I will also give you the largest state in the Union, California, a paradise, the most gigantic, wealthy, upper middle class. I mean, California had figured it out. They had a balanced budget every year. 20 million Mexicans move in, and now it's a deficit that rivals most of the rest of the world. I think it's like 60 billion. It's preposterous, the deficit. They cannot pay for themselves. So yeah, it actually does make a difference bringing in lots of third world people. I also did not say, like Trump, I didn't say specific countries. What I said is we don't have sink or swim, so we do need to have some way to try to skim the cream of the world the way we used to, and we sure aren't doing it now.
Fair point. I just want to clarify it. So if there was a physicist who was, or some AI genius, and they were coming from a country that wasn't Scandinavia, of course.
Of course, but what the other side does is cite, that Fortune 500 thing, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, they cite a few really successful immigrants who are from from South Africa, from Russia, and then, we get 10 of those and 20 million leaf blowers. No, this isn't...
Okay, hold on one second. Okay,
It's unbelievable to me that guys like Cenk Uygur don't see this. We've never seen mass migration like this, ever. If you look at the US data, some 8 million people have illegally crossed the United States from 2021 to 2024, which I think the number is way higher. A lot of experts will tell you that you should add another 2 million to that total, making it 10 million. That's what they call the gotaways. The ones that were not seen by border agents, that were never apprehended. And the ones that entered the country through a myriad of other ways, right? So let's say that brings the total of illegal migrants crossing the border to 10 million in 3 years. Philadelphia, the 6th largest city in America, is 2 million people. You've added 5 Philadelphias to the countries of people that you know nothing about. At 10 million a year, that averages out to about 300,000 people a month since Joe Biden took over. The greatest mass movement of people across U.S. borders in history, maybe across any border. And they keep coming. And if we continue with these current policies, they will keep coming and the numbers will be bigger. And this is not a guess, this is a guarantee. They're not coming because they fear political prosecution in their home country, or else you'd see a lot of women and younger people coming in. These people crossing the border are mostly military-age men. They're not coming here because they fear the drug cartels. When you see women, they're not coming here because their husbands are abusing them. Maybe for a very small fraction of them, this could be true. But for the overwhelming majority, they are coming for a much more obvious reason. America is the richest country in the world, and they can make some money. It's simple. It's a risk-reward economic calculation. If the reward of entering America is greater than the risk of deportation, migrants will keep coming. And not just from Mexico, and not just from Central America, but from most every country in the world. In the last 3 years, we've had migrants come illegally from 150 countries. China, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Mauritania, Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, just to name a few. They're coming because they get a generous banquet of government benefits and economic opportunities available to them in America when they cross illegally that they don't have in their own country. Let's get back to it.
Unbelievably running very low on time. Here's what I'd like to do. Before we go to closing statements, what I'd like to do is, the proposition tonight was, should America shut its borders? You can interpret that one of two ways. You can interpret that, should America solve the problem at the southern border, or should America stop immigration at all? And I would love for each of you to each take 1 minute. If you're President of the United States, could happen, there might be an open convention, let's see. What would you do? Like, what does a sensible immigration policy actually look like? Because I don't think anyone on this stage would defend what's happening at the southern border right now.
Yeah. So let's get constructive. So I love this question. So number one, I would hire a lot more Border Patrol. Number two, I would hire a lot more asylum judges. And these are relatively easy to do. And we waste so much money in this country. And that's something that all of us want to do. So that would stem some of the tide. But the best way to stem the tide, but you need that. The second part that you need is for us to do a reasonable, sane immigration policy for documented immigrants so we can get all that new blood in. Look, it's easy to look back and say, well, I would have let the Jewish physicists in. I mean, that's a super convenient thing to say. And I would have let Peter Thiel in, and I would have let Elon Musk in, but I wouldn't have let anybody else in. But you don't know who Elon Musk is. You don't know who's going to be amazing, et cetera. So we need, and we do far too little documented immigrants. But by the way, once we increase the size of the documented immigrants, then if you cross the border, after we increase it and we gave you plenty of opportunity to do it the right way, then you're one and done. Then once you cross the border illegally and we catch you, you can never return. So that is a fair trade. And the last thing I would do is a Marshall Plan for Latin America. And the reason that I would do that is not just because it's the moral thing to do, because it's stunningly successful. So when we did it for Germany, Japan, Turkey, and Greece, we turned those, especially Germany and Japan, our greatest enemies into our greatest allies. They became an incredible economic engine that was trading partner for us. The number one reason people are coming is because of economic desperation. The people who used to come here the most were Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala. But now, the huge fluxes of immigrants, in fact, they stayed relatively the same under Trump and Biden. The extra people are largely from Venezuela and Colombia. Is it because they were all of a sudden got a memo in Colombia? Time to replace the whites. Okay, let's go do a replacement theory. No, they were desperate and had to come here because of the situation in Venezuela. So help those countries and then
So
say
a Marshall Plan for Latin America, more Border Patrol agents, more asylum judges, a more sensible policy. Nick, 1 minute. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, the libertarian in me would never forgive myself if I didn't point out the Marshall Plan is one of the most oversold ideas in history. Germany, the German economic miracle took place after the controls put on by the U.S. and the Allies on the German economy were lifted off, and Konrad Adenauer, changed things there. Okay.
Our border, what would you do?
Our border, what I
Or
would
our
do,
immigration policy.
make it easier to come into the country legally, do more of the processing in the home countries, and then you will have people walking through the door showing papers. You can go to a Staples in America and get a TSA pre-check. We can come up with ways of helping to process more people who don't have criminal records, who don't have communicable diseases, or at least none that are worse than whatever the president has, and then bring them here. You forbid them from getting welfare and things like that, and things will thrive. That's what happened in the past, and it would happen again now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Saurabh.
Southern agriculture took much longer to industrialize or mechanize than agriculture in the North. Why was that? Because in the South, for a long time, they could rely on free labor. Likewise, we have the same process going on. Just having a giant output GDP just because we have lots of people, that's not national prosperity, right? We could bring in 100 million people and just give them, agricultural, old school agricultural equipment without machines to do stuff, and that would look like GDP growth. But it's not the kind of labor-saving technology that pushes our economy to the next stage. And as long as we have mass cheap labor, our economy won't go to that next stage. That next industrial revolution, whatever it may be, it's hindered because there's no incentive to use labor-saving technology. So what I would do is I would close off low-wage migration, period. Only skills-based migration. And then I would stop the mockery that we've made of the asylum process. where we treat economic migrants and wink at them and call them asylum seekers. It's violating international law in a way because there's a clear definition of what a refugee really is, and 80% of these people at the very least are not. I've embedded with them, I've traveled with them as a reporter. They are not asylum seekers. The vast majority are properly counted as economic migrants.
Thanks, Laura.
For one thing, I totally agree with that, except I say 100% of the asylum seekers are fake, phony frauds. It's also the worst way to get people into our country. So, oh, fantastic, you wrecked your country. Why don't you come here? Great idea. If you come from a stable country, a successful country, you can never get asylum. Because, oh, you had foresight and wisdom and you guys got it all together. No, 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 you're out. Only you who have wrecked your countries, Venezuela, case in point. I kept reading in the New York Times how they're all cheering for Chavez. I know it's now Maduro, his handpicked successor. He promised the poor, I'm going to steal from the rich and give it back to you. And every few years they'd re-elect him, and the New York Times is so excited. Maybe they could finally get communism that works. And they're all waving their red hats, and he tells them to move on to the golf courses. He actually expropriated all of these farms, private farms, golf clubs, and told the poor to move on to the golf clubs. And they're out waving their red hats for Chavez. And now they've wrecked their country, so they want to come here and collect our welfare instead. So no asylum cases. One other point is, look, most of these laws are already on the books. You know, even if you qualify for asylum under the law, you are supposed to be held in detention. You are supposed to be turned away at our border right now if you could possibly become a public charge. No, instead we're handing them free iPhones and here's your free housing. You can't get in if you pass through another country where you could get asylum. I mean, that's another thing about the humanitarian relief. Why do they all have to come here? Can't we help them where they are? Couldn't we help them in a nearby country? All of them have to pass through Mexico to get here, and by law, Mexico takes refugees, so automatically they should be turned away. And a third one, actually, there are many more, but a third one that is obviously being ignored is they have to show that they've had all their vaccinations. Okay, nobody's being stopped. Nobody's being turned away. Not one of these alleged asylees should be getting in at the border. So that goes to what kind of laws you write. You can't write the laws you want because the people enforcing them won't enforcing them. You need a border and a total shutdown on immigration just to get our books in order.
Okay. Many arguments tonight, well made. We're now going to go to closing statements, and we're going to do it in the reversed order. So, Cenk, we're going to start with you. I'm putting 2 minutes on the clock. Closing statements for the night. Yeah, please.
Illegal immigration is going to be one of the big reasons why Donald Trump wins again, and it is one of the big reasons why he won in 2016. He promised to stop it. He made significant progress with it. He extended the border wall, although his efforts were, what would you say, they were hampered, I guess, by liberal judges and Democratic Congress. But he instituted a Remain in Mexico policy, which was amazing. It forced migrants to wait for asylum claims to be decided while they waited in Mexico. He fully empowered border and immigration agents to detain, deport, and export illegal immigrants back across the border. Again, another big help. With the chances of getting into the U.S. diminish by those policies, migrants figured out the trip was often not worth the cost. Going back to what I said earlier, it's about risk-reward. If the reward of crossing the border is bigger than the risk of getting caught, you're going to keep trying to cross. What you have to do is switch the equation around. You have to make the risk much greater than the reward. Because if the risk is bigger than the reward, the smuggling fees of, say, $10,000 to cross the border that they have to pay to the cartel, the time involved in traveling, the thousands of miles on foot that a lot of these people are doing, the dangers of being robbed, if you're a woman, maybe the dangers of being raped or killed along the way. If you have to go through these more stringent, rigorous policies, you might think, well, when Biden took over, this all changed. The calculation went back to a very, very high reward to a very, very low risk. Border agents, at this point when Biden was in office, to this day, are pretty much like Walmart greeters. Hey, come on in. Bring your friends and family. Let's go. When you can just walk through the border, come into a country, receive benefits, better your life, commit a criminal act, by the way, when you're crossing the border illegally, but if no one cares, it becomes like the damn California gold rush, a mass movement of people towards one single goal to cross the border into America in order to get housing, Medicare, economic benefits. People that are coming through the border when they have children, these children speak very little to no English. Now they have to be educated in our public schools. If they get sick, where do you think they go? If you've been to an emergency room lately, in most big cities in America, you know where they're going. And then there's the freaking crime. We know almost nothing about the people that we're letting in illegally. It's inevitable that some of them are bad actors. When you let in millions and millions of people, there's going to be a lot of bad people that you're letting in. Even if the majority are good, the fact that you're letting in illegally, even one person. Look at all the people. Laken Riley's the one that comes to mind right now, but look at all the deaths that have happened in America, all the crime that has happened because of illegal immigrants. Now, the left will try to tell you that, well, white people commit crimes too, and black Americans commit crimes too. Exactly, that's my point. The point is we have problems at home already. Let's try to solve that. Let's try to solve the crime committed by our own people before we bring in the criminals and bad actors from other countries. Let's take a look at Anne Coulter's closing statement, because I really do think that she hits the nail on the head here. Let's get it.
What Sohrab said about his Mexican classmates not wanting any more illegal immigrants from Mexico. Well, yeah, duh, everybody who came here, apparently they didn't want to live in Venezuela, they didn't want to live in Senegal, they didn't want to live in Mexico. And by the way, we've already taken 1/3 of Mexico. So here's a thought experiment for you. If it makes no difference what they've done in their own countries in 1,000 years, not establishing a stable government, then why don't we just make every Latin American country an American state? Would that make a difference? Would our country be the same country it is? Because even though immigrants, and I mean both legal and illegal, commit a boatload of crime, and you can look at the prison records, you can look at the immigrant hotspots, you can look at the real statistics, even though they collect a boatload of welfare and commit every terrorist attack, that isn't the main point I'm making. It is about saving our country. Do we remember Mexico throwing back the Nazi war machine? Why, no, they did nothing in World War II. That was the United States of America. It's been the United States of America that has rescued the rest of the world from tsunamis, from earthquakes, from warlords, from starvation, and not by saying, hey, move in. Once this country is gone, and we're heading there fast, it's lights out for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Cenk Uygur is one delusional individual, I'll tell you. When you start just giving citizenships to people that are illegals, and even people that are legal immigrants, when you have a system like chain migration, what chain migration does is it allows immigrants to not only sponsor their immediate family members, their spouses, their children under 21, but much of their extended family once they gain citizenship. So once you gain citizenship as an immigrant, you can sponsor any unmarried adult or child or any child that they may have, their cousins, their brothers, their sisters. The data from Princeton University shows that the average immigrant sponsors an average of 4 other relatives. So for every 1 million immigrant that you grant permanent residency to, you're getting another 4 million. That is insane numbers. These are people that you can't assimilate that into a society. And we have also silly things, right? Like diversity visa. So this is a lottery, a program designed to admit people from underrepresented countries into the U.S. to make America more diverse. So diversity visa applicants don't even need a high school education diploma. They don't need to have skills to work a job. They pretty much don't need anything. And then again, once they get in, there's this chain migration that they're allowed to sponsor people, spouses, unmarried children, cousins, sisters, anybody. It's a nonstop flow of immigrants coming into America. Now, they paint it as legal when you look at chain migration, but it is insane. And on top of the illegal immigrants coming in, there is a problem. And we have to find a way to fix it, because we will lose our country. I'm all for immigration. I'm all for legal immigration. Follow due process. And if you do, welcome. But like Anne Coulter was saying, I do think that we should be vetting people more in order to get skilled people coming into the country. And by that, I don't mean that they need to be engineers or doctors, but you have to provide some sort of a needed skill. An electrician, a plumber, something of the sort. You can't come into the country. That goes for any country. You need to provide value to the country either by investing, having money, or providing a skill. And in most countries, in order to become a citizen, it's a long process. It costs a lot of money when you come in legally, because if you're not there legally, they will kick you out. You need to speak the language. There's a lot of boxes that you need to tick that right now, almost nobody coming into the country is ticking those boxes. Get back to it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing to the channel. Help it grow. If you want to check out the full debate, the links are in the description down below. Peace out, everybody.